Alright, what's up everybody?
Two videos so soon?
Don't get used to it. Maybe get used to it. I don't know. Maybe you're wondering why I've made two videos in such rapid succession as two in the same week. What is wrong with him? It's because I'm forcing myself not to write right now. If you didn't know, in my free time, I mostly do two things. I read and I write. And who knows if I do either of those very well, but they say after you finish writing like a longer piece and you finish a draft, you should sort of let it rest, let it sit for a little bit before you come back and attack it for draft two. So that's what I'm doing right now, and my time is sort of freed up a little bit more when it comes to whatever time I can find to do that. I've decided to make another video. And I write a lot, but like I said, I also read a lot. To be exact, I am currently reading my 48th book of the year, and it is, the beginning of May when I'm recording this. So I do read quite a bit, and today, it's not quite halfway through the year, but it's like, a good 5 months, and I'm gonna talk about what my favorite 10 books of 2022 have been so far this year. So let's just jump right into the books. First book I'm going to talk about, I've been on a bit of a fantasy kick for whatever reason. Before I started the whole like booktube and bookstagram thing, I just wasn't caught up with like any contemporary authors, and you're gonna laugh when I say I wasn't caught up with this author because he's been around for like 2 decades already, but it's the first I ever read of Brandon Sanderson. With Brandon Sanderson, a lot of people recommend that you start with Mistborn, and this is one of my favorite books of the year so far. Mistborn is a really cool, very accessible fantasy magical universe where all of the magic and like the powers that the characters have are sort of like scientifically derived from the presence of metals, and you can like push against metals and there's a equal and opposite pull, and it's very like science-based magic, but it's still very wondrous and it's very well balanced. Essentially, the way Brandon Sanderson talks about it is this is the universe if you want to equate it to Harry Potter, if Voldemort sort of won, and in his mission he won out, and then 1,000 years into the future, this is what the world would look like with the Dark Lord successful in their venture. We pick up with Vin, who is sort of like a street thief, and she gets recruited to a gang of thieves who are planning a heist and are trying to rob the Lord Ruler of, the most powerful metal in the universe and try to like overthrow the Empire. That's what Mistborn is all about. It's a trilogy, and then there's like a new generation trilogy, so there's technically 6 books. I think he's coming out with a 7th soon, and I've really enjoyed my first experience with Brandon Sanderson. I'm currently reading the final book in this first trilogy, and it's been a great time to read his work. Sort of continuing with the fantasy, I didn't start reading Lord of the Rings until the end of 2021. I read The Fellowship like in October or November, I think, of last year, and just recently I finished The Two Towers, the 2nd volume in Tolkien's epic adventure. You probably have read it. I'm probably the last person on earth to read these books, and if you have read it, congrats. It is an awesome set of books here. I guess I wouldn't call it a trilogy because it's all technically one book. The Lord of the Rings is. Do I need to say a lot? You've probably seen the movies. You probably know all about The Hobbit and everything else. Lord of the Rings is great, all right? Every character is lovable. You love their little quest with the little ring and the little hobbits. We love Lord of the Rings. Tolkien's ability to create a believable world that, without like delving into a ton of it and just sort of embarking on the usual practices of like a travel log, he makes it feel like huge. It is massive. Even though you only visit a select amount of spots, it just feels so sprawling and so epic, yet it doesn't feel like too tangential or distracting, and I've really enjoyed The Lord of the Rings. The next book, number 3, and again, these are in no particular order, 2001, A Space Odyssey some sci-fi. I always wanted to read this. It was written for the film to be based off of. Like, this was written at the same time as the screenplay and the script of Stanley Kubrick's movie. And the book is really interesting. It's different than the movie in some subtle ways, and it also continues on to more books. This is, I believe, a trilogy, or there might be more parts to it. I really want to read the next ones. But 2001: A Space Odyssey, this is like one of the coolest first sort of pioneer implementations of AI gone bad, or AI sort of finding its way into being conscious. And it's a really interesting use of that. If you like space stuff, this is like as good as it gets, and it doesn't delve too far into the weeds in the beginning. It's just epic. For such a short book, this takes the story to like epic scales, and it's extremely impressive. It's really well written. Arthur C. Clarke did an awesome job with this, and I really want to rewatch the movie now. All right, book number 4. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, when I posted that I read this on Bookstagram, were like,
yeah, I sleep on Dean Koontz. Like, I've never read a Dean Koontz.
I had never read a Dean Koontz before last year, I think, and my mom actually recommended me Watchers, which was like the first book that got her into reading when she was younger, and I loved it. I don't do a ton of like 5-star reads on Goodreads anymore, and this is one of the few from like the past 2 years that I've given 5 stars. It is so good. I'll give you the short blurb because Dean Koontz's books are the best at giving you like a few sentence blurbs. From a top secret government laboratory come 2 genetically altered life forms. One is a magnificent dog of astonishing intelligence, the other a hybrid monster of a brutally violent nature, and both are on the loose. That is it. So essentially a man comes across this crazy dog that was in a laboratory that escaped and has the ability to like communicate with humans telepathically and can like spell out stuff with Scrabble words. And essentially the other creature, which is like a bastardized version of what the military was trying to work on, escapes and is pretty much like after the dog because that monster was like jealous of the treatment the dog received. And I boiled it down a lot there, but there's a lot going on in it. It's as good as Dean Koontz gets, except for this next book, which I think I liked just as much. Book number 5, I think here, Winter Moon by Dean Koontz. Again, I slept on him. He's got a great mustache, but let's focus on that mustache a little bit. Look at that mustache. It's like H.P. Lovecraft meets The Shining meets Montana Ranch. And that's it. That's my pitch for that. Another book. I majored in English literature in college, yet I somehow managed throughout high school and college to completely avoid so many classics, including pretty much everything Ernest Hemingway ever wrote. And I read The Sun Also Rises this year, and I loved it. It is so good. I love his writing. There are not too complicated, not too detailed exchanges through dialogue, and there are like breaks in dialogue and really just like short, choppy, punchy conversations and situations tell such an elaborate and emotionally charged story. So interesting the way he writes. There's a very hopeless and sad aspect to The Sun Also Rises, yet it creates like a warm feel. It's tough to describe. I encourage you, if you haven't read The Sun Also Rises, to check it out. The next favorite book, I believe this is number 8, is Weaveworld by Clive Barker. This was my first experience with Clive Barker ever, and a ton of people recommended me different stuff like The Great Secret Show and The Books of Blood and Cabal and Weaveworld, and I went with Weaveworld and I don't regret it. This was a super awesome book. It's a portal fantasy where a guy who is not necessarily, he's like not happy with his life. He has a crappy family life and not so great living, and he happens upon this rug that is being pulled from this woman's estate, and it's like very intricately woven. You can kind of see the pattern on the outside of this edition, and he like falls into the rug and discovers like a whole world. It's called Weaveworld, and through it he realizes that like there are people trying to break into the real world from this Weaveworld, and there are people trying to get into Weaveworld from the real world, and there's just a lot of things going on, and it's very intense. The characters are great, and it's a very imaginative, scary, sprawling fantasy that, again, I still find very accessible and fun, and I would definitely recommend people who haven't read Clive Barker yet to take a look at Weaveworld. Number 9 on the list, something I've wanted to read for a very long time. I'm a fan of graphic novels. I have part of my shelf space, if you watch the bookshelf tour, dedicated to graphic novels. I just started reading the Sandman series from Neil Gaiman this year. It is so good. Lock and Key is another one of my favorite. It's incredible. This cult tries to summon death in order to like vanquish it and, you know, achieve immortality, and they accidentally summon Death's younger sibling, Dream, who happens to be this like very angsty looking like goth dude. And he's awesome, and it's great, and then it has to do with him being imprisoned for like so long, and then he has to travel back to the dream world and do all this stuff, and you kind of meet other DC universe superheroes and villains, and there's these fun tie-ins, and Neil Gaiman's an amazing writer, and the illustrators are like, it's so good. And I encourage you, again, if you're reticent about graphic novels or you haven't read Sandman in general, you should check out Sandman, because it is like a piece of storytelling art. It is a masterpiece. Book number 10, Jurassic Park. Love the movie. Like, if the movie is on TV in the 24 years I've been alive, I don't think I've ever like turned away from it. There could be anything happening in the world, and if Jurassic Park is on any channel, I'm like, I'm in. For however long, what that movie is like 2 hours long, I'm like, for these 2 or 3 hours with commercial breaks, I am bought into this movie. And the book is so good. Michael Crichton is an amazing sci-fi writer. He goes through science fiction in such an interesting way, and it has like these fun charts and stuff. And if you remember the movie, like there's always these like crazy 90s computer graphics that you're like, oh, I wonder what's going on, and you sort of like see those on these pages. But Michael Crichton is the type of writer who introduces like an element of magic to the science in the science fiction, where he goes so far with the science where it starts to feel like magic, but then you just don't question it, because that's the law of whatever he's writing about. That's the law of the universe within the science fiction he's writing, and it just creates this like sensational aspect to it that's really engaging and hard to pull yourself out of. And I think Jurassic Park is an amazing example of that. If you love the movies, you will love the book, and I definitely encourage people to check it out. Those are my favorite 10 books of 2022 so far. I'm almost at 50 books read through the first 5 or so months of the year. I'm not sure I'll be able to keep up with this pace. Who knows? These books might be on my favorite books of 2022 list. But hope your reading is going well. Any of these are on your list, let me know in the comments below. And if any of the ones that are your favorite weren't on my list, let me know. I'd love to hear your recommendations. Other than that, hope you're all doing well. Hope you're staying safe out there. And yeah, we'll see you next time.